shots, yeah. Because you think you know where all the cuts are going to go. They rarely do. But of course, a montage can be made just out of taking a couple days and shooting the hell out of something, and then doing it in the editing room. But we had a very specific plan for the one in The Graduate because we wanted to end it with a shot of him jumping onto Mrs. Robinson by landing on the raft, or the other way around, whatever that was. So we knew where we were going and where we were starting, which you usually do if you do a one kind. But yeah, it's good to write them out fully and in detail, even though they always vary.
Can you guys talk about the best writer-director relationships you've encountered and the worst, especially since you've been on both sides?
I've never had a really bad writer-director relationship. She asked about writer-director. Did you hear that? Oh, okay. Oh, I know you. Yeah, I've never had a bad one, but then almost all the directors I've written for have been friends of mine. Or became good friends, I think. And you know sort of early on whether you're the same fit or not, or whether you are understood. Now, in the case of the anecdote I told earlier about the foreign movie, the director was a good friend of mine, but nobody for miles around spoke proper English. So, and I was writing the script as they were shooting, so I just couldn't attend to all this stuff, and it happens. But I've never had an adversary relationship with the director. Well, you work for tougher guys.
Well, I don't really know how to answer that question either. But, film, what we're all trying to do is a communal effort, which means a lot of people are involved, and everybody comes from a slightly different angle at them. Now, my best experience was Lunch but I was also the producer of that. And in television, the producer has a lot of that. And but what I tried to do with Lonesome Dove was make Lonesome Dove the star. And that we're all here to serve Lonesome Dove. And if we take care of Lonesome Dove will turn around and take care of my needs and your needs and her needs and his needs and so on. And that pretty much worked on Lonesome Dove. I don't know. I mean, I've also been in situations with directors who personally I like very much, but simply did not understand the material in the same way that I meant it to be understood. Without naming names, I want to tell this because it's also a funny story. Working on a film, and there were these fishermen, and the captain of the ship wasn't catching any fish. And the crew's really upset because they're not going to make any money if they don't catch fish. So one of them says, Skipper couldn't find a fish if it was hanging onto his dick with both hands. So the director reads that and he said, what's this? And I said, that's a very funny line. And he said, that's a funny line. I said, listen to me. I said, that's a funny line. And he thought about it one time and he said, Bill, he said, fish don't have hands. I said, I know. I said, also, they don't hang onto your dick. That's what makes that a funny line. And he just kind of shook his head, and I knew that line was gone from that movie. But the good thing as a writer is that, you can always stick these lines in your pocket, and you can pull them out and sell them to somebody else down the track.
What's up, Doc? That was such a sort of slapstick. Did you write that? Like funny?
The chase, you mean?
Yeah, wasn't it a 12?
Yeah, I wrote all of the chase, but I never, ever thought they would shoot most of it. And I wasn't around at It's the only film I ever wrote that I wasn't around for. And to my amazement, they shot every inch of it better than I could have imagined it, and added a couple of beats to it. Yeah, no, that's a montage in a sense too. You know, it gets you from A to B in real time, but of course it's absurd, and it's kind of a comedy montage. And sometimes you just have to rely on Rod and/or the director to get it down. And sometimes they do. And that's part of the genius of the collaboration too between a director and an art director. Because Polly Platt, who was then married to Bogdanovich, she was the first art director I ever saw on a set who looked through the camera. She looked at all the setups. It was, I think, an amazing, to the film's amazing advantage that she was able to do that. Because she was able then to say to Peter things like, if you move over there, you'll get that or that. And that second eye sometimes helps a lot. It's usually that second eye is on the camera, but sometimes it isn't. And if it is, then there's a third eye. So it's all good. But I wrote it all out, thinking in the back of my mind all the silent film chases I could remember. And as I said, I didn't really think they'd do it. It was the last of its kind because it would cost too much money to do. But those are all montages too. You know, the great chase, which I just saw again the other night in the Steve McQueen film, Bullet. That too is a montage, really, just stretched out. And they are great to do. It's real hard to think of original ways to do them in this day and age because they're done 100 times a year.
I have sort of a related question that is not necessarily about montages, but I guess it could be. But is it ever hard if you want to have a scene where there's not necessarily a lot of action and not a lot of dialogue? But I think with the graduating and just floating in the pool, and maybe that's when you'll see more music being
When you
played
sense
more.
life.
Yeah, is that, do you have to fight for those scenes? Did you write those in advance, or?
You don't have to fight for them. It's the director that has to fight for them unless it's powerful enough, as most directors are. Just say, no, this gives it as a, I mean, Westerns, of course, are filled with great, all the iconic Westerns, the John Ford Westerns are filled with, one likes to say scenic moments, but it's not always just the scenery. It's the faces of extraordinary actors that are just, you know, my Darling Clementine, Henry Fonda sitting on the porch is enough to make you know more than a ton of dialogue, let me tell you.
Can any of you speak to just sort of what you might think about as you're approaching writing descriptions in terms, I mean, I know for myself, I constantly overwrite, so I'm trying to pare it down in my head, you know, just, I mean, what you might think about in terms of economy, but at the same time, you know, ways in which you might let yourself go.
Again, I try not to think. And I'm not joking about that. I mean, I get in trouble and I think this ought to be longer, or I think this ought to be
I
shorter.
mean, maybe in context of what you've said about, you know, the good read versus, you know.
Yeah, but that's still a matter of feel for me. I mean, and I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that's my way.
Yeah, of course it's a matter of feel. But the question is extremely apt because reading scripts, I don't like reading scripts. I think it's a bastard form of entertainment. I want to see the movie or I want to read the book, but not the script. It is more interesting to me to read the script after I've seen the film, to see what happened between the writer's idea and the director's idea, assuming that they're different people. But you do have to be careful. I mean, obviously you do it the way it comes into your head, like Bill says, but you know that a guy, particularly at a studio, reading a script, does not want to read descriptive passages. They want to get to the hot dialogue and the the points of action that will sell the film. So it's a very tricky proposition, particularly if you're writing, well, war. War is tough because you have to describe a lot of stuff, unless it's very existential. War and westerns, and stuff with vistas, and stuff that you really have to explain. And why I said war movies was because if you describe a battle scene and you describe a berm in the distance, you got to assume that 50 to 75% of the readership does not know what the hell a berm is. So you have to make a decision whether to describe it, explain it, define it, or let some poor sap go to the dictionary,
Which they won't do.
which they won't do.
Yeah, just a basic formatting thing. If you are writing something like a montage like that, do you find that it's more preferred on the part of readers to do it as separate scenes where you have a scene heading and then cut to another scene heading, or do you just put a big montage at the top?
I do a series of shots.
Yeah.
After that, there's no ABC, there's no 1, 2, 3. There's, God knows, no cut to, dissolve to, pan to, close up on, ever, any of that stuff.
With all due respect to the writing programs, and I use one, I use Final Draft myself and love it dearly. There is no point, at least in the first 3 drafts of any script, to number or letter scenes. It just isn't. It's just aggravation. And for a montage, that's the way I do it too. Series of shots, or sometimes series of scenes, because they're more than a shot.
It's silly as this might sound. The first thing is, never forget you're telling a story. The second thing is you're trying to tell it through film. But the first thing always is you're trying to tell a story. This happens, and then this happens, but then this happens. Then you have dynamic. But you're trying to tell a story.
And pursuant to that idea, the corollary to that is the question that I think most of us ask ourselves as we're writing is, why am I writing this scene? What does it have to do with the scene that just went before it? Does C really lead to D, and has D got anything to do with D? So it is nice to think in kind of triads. What the scene you're writing came from and what's it going to go into. So it isn't purely improvisatory, which I confess to doing a lot of the time. And that too is part of the storytelling thing, because you want a reader also to be, it isn't a film yet. You want a reader to keep going from page 1 to the end. So you need to have the reader not have to stop and think, why is he telling me this? Why is this? What has this scene got to do with anything? It's a good way to lose readers and audience.
Well, I was wondering if you could apply what you said about writing and digging posts to the scene description.
Answer that again.
You said once in a class you related writing to digging posts.
No, setting posts just a certain distance apart.
Exactly.
That's what you're talking about. I think the best screenplays are closer to poetry than they are to novels or short stories or any other literary form. The reason being that I don't think good movies, good screenplays, that the real juice should be on the land. If the real juice, what the author is trying to get across, is on the land, it doesn't give the audience anything to do. But if what the author does through the screenplay is set the post just a certain distance apart, this happens and then this happens, so that it is the viewer or the reader who makes the jump. That makes them a participant in the story rather than an observer, which is to say you don't want to tell them everything. If you tell them everything, there's literally nothing for them to do except sit back and observe and watch. What I know about writing screenplays, I learned by going to movies and watching the same movie twice. good movies and bad movies. I watched one time so I'd know what's going on. Then I'd go back and watch it a second time, and I would shift in my seat where I could watch the audience. And you can tell absolutely when that story, that film, has the audience and when it lets them go. I mean, it is just like somebody shouting at you, let me go. You know, it's so obvious. But I think that's what great art, great literature, everything else does, is it tells you something that you know but didn't remember you knew. And that's why the universal response to great art, great film, great literature, great music, great whatever, is always the same. Whatever period of history you're talking about, whatever country you're talking about, whatever ethnic background, but it's always the same. It's yes. The first response to great stuff is you say, yes, I agree. Then you can think about it or whatever. But the great films, pick a great scene you like, you didn't analyze it. Some part of you said, yes, yes. And I think that's what we all artists strive for, is being in that circle that one or two times maybe, their work was able to elicit that from an audience, which I think is a great calling.
In historical fiction, where there's music, as screenwriters, do you put that in, or is somebody else going to do that later, naturally?
Well, again, I mean, somebody else will do that later. But it also depends on how active you are in the production, or how active you're able to. I mean, if you're producing, then you have everything to say about that.
No, just writing the script.
Well, see, I also think, like I was saying, never use pan, never use close-up and song when you're writing. But the way you write a scene, if you write the scene right, it absolutely dictates when there's a close-up. It absolutely dictates when there's a wide shot. It's all in the script.
But you don't suggest what the song would be.
I don't.
Okay.
If you were using.
Well, when you talk about writing minimalist, that's sort of what I'm thinking, that somebody else could do that job. We'd probably get it right if it's written correctly.
Well, somebody else will do it,
Okay.
no matter what you've written. But you can certainly write a guideline. You can say, it would be nice the streets of Laredo to play here. As you know, it all has to do with people later down the line that have their points of view, and also you just can't have a birthday party and sing happy birthday without paying $500 to those sisters who are dead.
Since y'all's writing contains such strong characters, did y'all work with the actors in either rehearsal before the shoot or during the shoot at all?
Sometimes. Yeah, but rarely change.
So that if your actors got it because you're writing this that way?
Well,
Or did.
Did you ever contribute constructive criticism?
sure. Now, well, you have to let the director do that, unless one is the director, and then you do. Sure, actors can be told. I mean, surely some of us here have thought about the nuclear problem. I just don't understand why nobody went over to, let's say, Michael Douglas for one, an actor's name and said, "Oh, Michael, it's nuclear, and you're playing a scientist, or somebody we should know." It's happened. I can probably list 100 films where simple words like that, in today's environment, no wonder it's mispronounced. Or really bad grammar from characters who ostensibly have had a university education. And nobody will come and say, no, you shouldn't say, she gave that to my sister and I. It sounds wrong, bud. Can you change it to me? But nobody does a lot of the time. And I don't get it. That's why, not a writer necessarily, but an educated grammarian should be on the set.
And the trick is when you do it, you know, you're gonna talk to the actor and so on. I mean, you have to pick a moment which it becomes private between you and the actor. And I've found that they really do, the really good actors really, really appreciate it. You know, you say, listen, you know, without stepping in front of the director, which God knows is delicate and dangerous. You know.
Oh, I would never do that. Without going to the director first. I've gotten in trouble for that.
I wouldn't grab the call.
Yeah.
Bad writing, bad ideas aside, what are some cliches, things that we should avoid just because they're overdone? Not necessarily because, you know, just some pet cliches of yours that you've seen too much of recently.
Everything's a cliche. I mean, if it's done badly. If it's done badly, it's instant cliche. It reminds you of what it was extrapolated from, but it's done badly.
Right, I'm saying aside from things that are done badly. In other words, you could do something, you could film, you could write a beautiful scene, you could have it filmed, and it's like, you know, we've seen that 3 times already, you know? There's some things that are overdone. I'm talking about overdone too many times.
No, but see, the trick, everything's been done under the sun. I mean, we're just a new bunch. But it's all been done, you know. I'll never do anything differently that's already been done somewhere by someone. The trick is, put the spin on it that is right for your particular time, your particular people that you're traveling on the globe with. You know, that's all we're doing.
So you're gonna quit putting a calendar on the wall with the leaves falling off?
You know, I haven't thought about it. They'll never know where it came from.
Close it with the train wheels too.
And the steam going up.
They're all usable again, for some reason. I mean, they're usable as comedy, if nothing else. It's like, you know, the montage of things for a sex scene, the climax of a sex scene, which used to be fireworks or a waterfall or horses rearing or birds falling off. Endless series of comedy versions of those. Maybe they should, all your cliches can be recycled. I don't have anything I don't ever want to see again. Otherwise, who would go to horror films? How many have we seen? I like them. I keep going to see them. The same people get murdered. You know, it's all in the doing. I once said to a group of people at a film festival, I do not ever want to see a film ever made again with the last line. And I said the last line, which is, I said, has been in over 600 American films in my time. I was making up a number, of course. That evening, a film screened with that last line. And it was humiliated. I was embarrassed. You really want to know what it is? Yes. Okay. Let's go home.
Just back to sort of the nuts and bolts of writing descriptions and settings. I've seen some where it's completely just third person, and then I've seen a lot where it's, you know, we see this move around the corner, and then some scripts go back and forth third person and use of the we. Is there any particular?
I personally would never do we, because that's just taking the reader out of the story.
Okay.
I think we is appalling. It's a silly pretension. But, you know, it's not only about
What a good
streets
question.
and mountains and stuff. It's also about rooms and houses and the insides of things and what they look like. It makes a huge difference in a film, as it does in a play or any kind of writing, to know in certain cases that there is a bookshelf in front of the stairway, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. That there's a grandfather clock there and a big couch there, because you need it. You need to have that in somebody's mind as they're reading it. I don't think you can overdo it if there's a real point to it. But the we stuff has got to go. Yeah. Also stuff like smash cut. Please don't write stuff. Because there is no such thing.
For feedback.
Oh, hi. Smash cut. It was invented by the writers of action films about 20 years ago. So it goes from a bowl of porridge to his face. But it's a cut. It's just a dopey way of the writer pretending that he's infused the writing with some kind of chemical.
It's a trickster script.
Let's say you have a great story, character-driven, whatever, and it isn't vital, right, when you're fleshing out the story that you know this person's profession or world they're in. But then at some point, you need to figure that out. Do you have any tips for figuring, where to set this story or what profession to give them?
Say it again.
You have a story,
Yeah.
and a character journeying, but they could be making this journey as an accountant or as a bullfighter, or, do you have any tips of figuring out, where can I place this person to go through this journey?
Well, being an accountant or a bullfighter could make a difference. I don't know the answer to that, to tell you the truth, but I'm not sure I understand what it's.
And that's one of those things that the writer has to understand. I mean, it's your story. You're God. It's not, that's your question. It's always going to be that.
A physical journey.
No, I mean more of an internal journey.
Oh.
There's a story, this person has to confront things in his personality and deal with it, and I don't want to use the arc word and get stung. But he could do this, as a computer programmer or as an accountant or this.
Not in the same way.
Yeah, what interests you? What dramatizes it for you? And what do you know about it? That you can provide enough interesting information to the character to make a worthwhile sequence of events out of it for a reader, a viewer,
There is a period where, while the paper is on your desk, that you are God. That changes. But while you're God, take total advantage of it. And accept total responsibility for it too.
Can you talk about how you write? Like, do you write in the mornings? Do you write certain letters a day? Do you have a certain, regimen? Do you wait for the middle of the night?
This is a very personal question. I, unlike Bill, have no good habits whatsoever. I'm completely undisciplined, and the reason I'm here in this city is so that I don't have to work for 3 days. I write in the middle of the night usually, and my life is a wreck. I wait until it ends.
I think writers write, and when it's good, they're glad and they keep writing. When it's bad, they wad it up, throw it away, and keep writing. Now, when you do that, under what stimulants you do, that'll be different from writer to writer. But writers write, that's the deal. In the middle of the night, or on Saturday afternoons, or, occasionally, whatever. Writers write. That's it. And all of this stuff, really, that we're doing here. I mean, maybe you'll get a little this or a little that out of it or something. But the answers will come to you as you write. That's where the answers are. And you'll know who you are as a writer and what works for you and what doesn't. And, if we say, well, we write from 7 in the morning till 11 and we stop and we get a cup of coffee and talk to the stockbroker or whatever, and Monday we're back on it and whatnot. And you think, well, these guys are getting movies made. That's how you do it. And nothing could be more outrageous. Writers write, period.
Can you talk a little bit about the relationship with scene and setting to characters' internal motivations and description of character, in the sense that maybe of the experiences you've had where maybe dialogue doesn't carry something so much, but placement of character within a specific scene or within a certain vista might have developed that character's internal motivations, or where you've seen it, where you've done it.
You're a better talker on this than I. Almost all the stuff I write is a city and kind of conventional middle class environment. And I don't have a lot of stuff where I relate characters to environment. I mean, partly because it seems fairly obvious to me what the environments are. Middle class white America, and we all know what it looks like, and what the conventions are. But Bill writes more exotic stuff, so maybe he's better.
You know, again, it's what feels right to me. You know, I keep saying that, it sounds like a crutch, I know, but, you know, if a guy is lost in his thoughts, I'm gonna put him in a place where it's obvious he's lost in his thoughts. You know, where he's a tiny little something on the environment, which is a cliche. I love cliches. I think cliches are great truth. I mean, I do. I think they're the great truths, and if you examine them, you know, every time they're, you know, well, yeah, that's right. So how do you use that cliche, what Buck was saying, how do you use it, you know, to tell the same story in a different way?
Sometimes you
things are right, you know.
Sometimes you can write a descriptive line, at least at the time means something to you, and may mean something to a director or an actor. As in, so-and-so hates this room. That's simple. It's the kind of thing directors really do the best. I mean, I've seen Nichols trick actors into doing stuff they didn't know how to do or didn't know that they were going to do by suggesting things as simple. I mean, it's on a different level between a director and an actor, as in, take the actor aside and say, you have a terrible, terrible stomachache. You're in the scene. And it changes the environment, the immediate environment of the scene. There are ways as a writer you can do that, as in the one I just suggested. A very short relationship line about a character in an environment. He hates that room. He never wants to be in that room again. Stuff like that. And that can be helpful and can always be removed if it's an irritant. It can be removed from the script. But it helps sometimes when actors read scripts.
How closely did you work with Larry McMurtry when you were writing the script for Lonesome Dove?
You know, Larry sold the book. They approached me. I called Larry and I said, "Don't you want to write this?" And he said, "Well, no." He said, I'm sick to death of it. And so not one iota.
I love the way that your the film conveyed the inner landscaping of the characters as well as the outer
Thank you.
landscaping.
You know, I do think it was good writing, and I'm very proud of it. But you know, that is also one of the great joys of working with great actors. And you know, and there were some great actors in there who were really, you know, just like that with the material. And so that's one. Again, that's, you know, I mentioned the movie guy a while ago. I mean, that's one where in my career where the movie guy just said, you know, regardless of what you guys do, this one's going to work. And it shouldn't have worked in any number of ways, but it did.
That's the miracle. Nothing should work. No film should make it. Much too unwieldy or complicated. But the corollary to that is, I promise I won't use that word again, is that when the film is completed and it doesn't work, you know, you say, the writer says, I didn't see it that way, I didn't hear it that way. If the film is a success, it's exactly the way I imagined it. I don't know how they did it.
You know, it is true that things happen that are so much better than you ever dreamed. And for me, one example is the scene in The First Black Stallion where the boy learns to ride the horse. You know, he's in the water, and it's shot from underwater, and you know, and it's all in slow motion. You know, that boy catching up the horse and so on. Now, I wrote that scene because it's an old cowboy trick. You get a wild horse in a creek or in a tank, and you know, you climb down, and if it throws you, which it surely will, you're thrown into water and it won't hurt. And it tires the horse out, very quickly without hurting the horse. So I wrote that. But I never dreamed, it never occurred to me even once to shoot it from underwater. And that's what took an ordinary scene, from being a nice thing to just being something that is just, for me, indelible. And as it turned out, that was no genius on anybody's part. I thought Caleb Ishmael was the cinematographer. And a couple of months after it came out, I ran into Caleb and said, Caleb, I said, God, I said, I saw that scene and I said, I wept. It was so beautiful. I said, that was genius. He said, no, it wasn't. He said it was self-preservation. And the deal was, he and Caleb, Carol Ballard had started arguing the first week, and both of them are very determined characters, and they were just like this. So at the end of the first week, Caleb went home, he told his wife, said, throw away the credit card, said, I'm going to walk, I can't do this film. And, I probably won't work for a year, so let's not charge him things. So he went back with the idea of working one more week, and then he's going to be gone. But that week was the week where they shot the little scene where the boy's underwater stabbing the urchin with the knife on the stick. And the director wouldn't go underwater. So Caleb was underwater all day long. And it was peaceful. So that night he gets the shooting and scared. And I can shoot that underwater. So all of a sudden he saw where he could go another week. And then we had to get to this place where the boy learns to ride the horse and all that. 2 days underwater. So now there's another week. So that's where the scene comes from. I think it's just, God.
Bill, talk a little bit about riding a black stallion, because the first half of the movie has minimal dialogue.
I know, my mother said, how'd you write that with no words? It's essentially a montage. The poker deal on the boat, that's a group, including Bud, that I play poker with. It's not hard. You don't have to have dialogue. You can't forget that you're writing a story with moving images. Dialogue, essentially, in my view, should be the buttress to the moving images, but it's the images. You're telling a story with moving images. You're not shooting moving pictures of people jabbering. Though that can be wonderful if you can write like that. Most people cannot. But all those scenes you saw are written. They're all described. It's like in Perfect Storm. The wonderful thing about the modern age is you could write something like The Perfect Storm and describe all the waves. And again, these kids with computers can do it. Every wave is written. So, because they have to create them. So you can't just say a big wave. You got these angles and all that other stuff in terms of the guy that spins the wheel and all this. It was a lot of fun writing it with knowing you didn't have any dialogue. I actually did have more dialogue. I like to say, easy boy, easy. Whoa, big fella.
I've used that same dialogue, but it's a sex scene.
What are y'all working on now? Each of you.
I won't tell you, but maybe Bill will.
I'll give you the title, but I wouldn't know how to describe it. It's called The Door of the Widow Lopez. And it has one angle in it. And he's not a particularly good guy.
Well, this is for both of you. If you could think back to when you were 20 years old, sitting in an audience like this, if you'd had the opportunity sit in an audience like this as a writer and could have heard something that would have been really useful to avoid mistakes that the writer won't have.
Go to law school. When I was 20, I think I had complete other ideas about what it was all about. You know, it's a big difference between 20 and 40 and 60. Change your outlook on all of that stuff. I don't know, do you?
You know what, and if I were sitting where you're sitting at age 20, I would hope I would have been smart enough, probably wouldn't have been, but hope I would have been smart enough to say, be very careful how much of this shit you believe. And I'm not being facetious when I say it. You guys, some of you guys, maybe a lot of you guys, think we know, the three of us know. And I'm telling you, we don't know.
Nobody knows anything.
But the great attraction of doing this is if Buck doesn't know, and we don't know, and those guys don't know, then maybe we do know. And that's a great carrot at the end of the stick, you know. And it's also why you got to be careful, I think, to follow what your gut tells you, not what I tell you or Buck tells you or Bud tells you. But I mean, there's some part of you that knows. You just have to open the door to it.
I would say go to see, really go to see movies and analyze them. Go to see films that you think are great or that other people think are great, and try to figure out why. What did these people do that no one else did? What did this director, how did this director see this? What's the angle of vision that's different from everyone else's? Why is this dialogue so clever and, other hunks of dialogue aren't? What makes it work? I think that's the only way that, in our time, of course, there were actual theaters that played all the great movies. Before television brought it all. And it's great to be able to have it in your home. It's not quite the same. It's nice. But you can, at least, you can get Citizen Kane and run it over and over and over again. Or 400 Blows, or whatever it is that, you think is really good filmmaking. You can look at Lonesome Dove over and over and analyze why the story keeps your brain and your heart working at the same time. It doesn't mean that you could do it, but there's a key to seeing how someone else did it that might help.
And look at the bad movies too. For exactly the opposite. Why doesn't this work? And I said it while I'm sorry, but I really, really recommend going to movies and watching them twice. You can absolutely tell the effect that movie is having on an audience. An audience who is paid. They want to be pleased.
Can you talk a little bit about lengths of sequences? Because I've seen some movies lately where it seemed like they just went on and on and on with the sequence, and my thought was, I've got it, move on. Example, the end of Kingdom of Heaven.
Well, the story takes as long to tell as it takes to tell. And, sometimes it's a shame there wasn't an editor there fighting for, hey, cut this, you said it, move off, go to the next one. But that's a hard one.
Yeah, if you're really talking about taste, there are conventions in storytelling that vary from writer to writer and from country to country. Most of us are deeply bored by Ozu films, which are the iconic storytelling films of Japan. And it's not fair, because they aren't everything they're supposed to be. And if you're sympathetic to the environment and to the culture, they're very, very moving. But as an outsider, and of course it's true in the other direction. People who aren't American can be bored to death by things that we think are quite wonderful. So I think what you're asking is about taste. You decide how long you want a scene to run. If the director is really smart, he might say you cut it in half, and you can do it. Not hard. And as Bill says, you can always steal the good stuff for another film.
One more question.
That question, I've heard certain writers talk about the background scenery as a character in the story. I'm just wondering if you feel like that's the Bible idea or just bullshit.
I think that's true when it is a character. But that's, again, I think you have to serve your story. If the background needs to be a character to make that scene work, to tell the story you want to tell, then absolutely. If you're just doing it because somebody said to, blow that up.
Our time is up, and as we like to say at the end of all these sessions, let's go home.
Sorry? Yeah.